Good to see you guys. All very special people in my life, so it's good.
Right on. Well, if you're just joining us, we're getting ready for an amazing webinar today. And prior to your joining us, it's just a bunch of old friends saying hello to each other. So
Yes, it
good to
is.
see you gentlemen today.
Good seeing you.
Yes, good to be here. As I mentioned, I'm driving this webinar, so I'm hoping nothing goes wrong.
As long as we're recording, I'm sure it'll be fine. Now, in the recording, we can always edit out the things that don't go so well. But for the folks watching live, it's going to be live. It's going to be great.
Yeah, well, what I'm trying to do now is go live for overflow to YouTube, which we don't have overflow yet, but we probably will. And it's telling me I don't have permission, so we'll try to figure that out. If not, there'll be recordings for everyone.
You want some water or anything? You want water? Yeah.
If you're just joining us, we're about to get started with the webinar. We're glad that you're here. We are live in our various time zones, so it's going to be a lot to cover in a short period of time, but we're happy you're with us today. No matter how you found out about the webinar, we're thrilled that you're here.
Okay, we're at 3 o'clock.
Well, let's go ahead and get started then. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an extraordinary webinar with three incomparable gentlemen today. I'll introduce briefly to you, and then we'll be off to the races. We have a lot to cover in just a little bit of time because these folks all have super busy schedules like you do. We want to be aware of that. My name is Robert Helms, host of the Real Estate Guys radio program and partner at Collective Inner Circle, and I'll be your moderator today. Let me introduce you to the panelists. First of all, a gentleman who's been writing about the metals for many, many years, decades, in fact. Gold Newsletter has been out there. Let's say hello to its author. And, of course, the promoter of the New Orleans Investment Conference, Brien Lundin.
Thank you, Robert. Great to be here with this illustrious crew.
Indeed. Let's say hello to a man who probably, if you're familiar with gold and silver, needs no introduction. One of the greatest investors ever. And always, I learn when I hear him speak. That's Mr. Rick Rule. Hey, Rick.
Pleasure to be with you. I note that I've been a beneficiary of the New Orleans Investment Conference since 1987, a long time.
Wow. One of the OGs, as we say. And finally, wrapping up our panel, the best-selling financial author in the history of the world, Mr. Robert Kiyosaki. Hello, my friend.
Hello, 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 and I'm honored to be in a group of great financial educators. I mean, real financial educators. As you know, YouTube is filled with what they call effing new guys, and there's a lot of new guys on YouTube, and I kind of question their credibility. I'm looking forward to the New Orleans Investment Conference as Mr. Rule's investment conference because it's about real money. And I think it's very important conferences to attend.
Absolutely. And no matter what kind of an investor you are, what we're going to do today is talk about where the metals might fit into that, where things are going, why we've seen the increase we've seen, and even give you some suggestions about how to play that. I think, Brien, maybe I'll start with you because you often talk about the two different primary reasons that people put gold and silver into their portfolio. Can you start us off with that?
Yeah, I try to simplify it for people who are new to the sector because it gets really complicated, or it seems to be. It's overwhelming when they first come in. Do I buy physical metals? What physical metals? Or buy mining stocks, etc. So quite simply, in my mind, there are two reasons why you should own gold. There's insurance and investment. And I tell people that if you're just coming into the sector, you want to focus initially on insurance. You want to buy physical metals. You want to have at least your initial holdings accessible to you, not in a safe deposit box in a bank, however you want to do it, but have it some of it accessible to you, and then have other representations of physical metals to protect your wealth. What you're doing in that case is protecting against the inevitable depreciation of your currency, the drop in its purchasing power. You know that's going to happen. Unlike other forms of insurance, you're insuring against something that you know is going to happen, not like your home insurance where you're pretty sure it's not going to catch on fire or there won't be a flood or whatever. So you're definitely insuring against that, because gold and silver will preserve your purchasing power over the years to come. Now, if you believe that we're in one of those catch-up periods where gold and silver prices are going to surge relative to the dollar and other assets because of the macroeconomic environment at play, a period like I think we're in now, obviously, then you can invest in the sector. You can invest by buying those physical metals through leverage, which may or may not be advisable, or buying investments that are leveraged to gold. Silver offers natural leverage. Mining stocks offer natural leverage. Both of those sectors have, in every long-standing gold bull market, outperformed gold itself. So that's a way you can build wealth by an event that is kind of designed to preserve wealth.
So today, appreciate that, Brian. We're going to go beyond just the idea of having some ounces or bars of gold and silver in your immediate possession, but to some of the ways you can leverage, because I think that's key. But Robert, as long as I've known you, you've been a gold guy. People think of you as a real estate guy, and of course, we love that at the Real Estate Guys. But really, this is a wealth building tool that you've shared for a long time. How do you think precious metals should fit into someone's portfolio, and is it too late to get in?
Well, I'll give you a good reason. I wrote this book here, Fake Money, Fake Teachers, Fake Assets. And I've been on it, and oftentimes I hold these two things up. This is Zimbabwe. Wait, this is US. This is Zimbabwe, and this is US. And what's the difference? It's nothing. They're both fake.
Yeah.
And then when you look at it from that point of view, what happened to the Zim dollar? The question I've always asked, the reason the New Orleans Investment Conference is important, and Rick Rule Investment Conference is important. The question, what's the fate? What is the future of this? And if you know what's going to happen, you'll be rich. And if you don't know what's happening and you're saving this garbage here, you're wiped out. Because I had the distinction of being in the wrong place at the right time. I was at the Battle of Quang Tri in Vietnam. And that's when the North Vietnamese broke south and kicked our asses. And I tell you, gentlemen, it was frightening. I mean, the North Vietnamese came and they did not stop. Our South Vietnamese headed south. It was terrifying. I was also in Zimbabwe when this thing collapsed. And I had what they call, I forget what they called them, the war vets. And they came up with AK-47s in me. I'm sitting in Zimbabwe on a little farm. And they basically put the AK-47s up and they were going to kill me. I said, I'm back in Vietnam. I mean, the correlation was very similar. The weapons, the races had changed. There were black guys versus NVA. But the weapon was the same. It was AK-47. So the reason I am adamant about supporting the Rural Investment Conference and New Orleans Investment Conference is you want to see the future. You want to be prepared for what's coming. And if you're saving this garbage or this garbage here, you're going to get wiped out. So the reason is gold and silver or even today Bitcoin important? Absolutely. It's your future right now. And the reason I'm a real estate guy, because this here is debt. And I use debt to buy real estate. And our friend Dave Ramsey says, live debt free. And I'm much less civil to him than to you guys here.
Yeah.
Because I said, if you understood this toilet paper here, this is debt. And if we stop borrowing, it's gone. So when Ramsey says live debt free, I said, you better study your history. So the reason the New Orleans Investment Conference is important and Rick Rule's investment conference is you meet real people in the real industry who practice what they teach, unlike our colleges, which is why Trump is going after Harvard, because they're fake. And you want to come and find out the future as fast as possible. And those who have gold and silver have a chance. Those who are saving this or this are going to get wiped out. Very simple.
Such an important point. So many people are trying to stack up dollars or whatever currency that is in their area. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do for the reason we talked about, which is the opposite of what the real money is, what you call God's money, Robert, gold and silver. And I know you call Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies the people's money. And then that stuff you were holding up, well, that's not even money. That's just currency.
Well,
So,
this is
Rick, you just had your, yeah, that stuff.
expensive toilet paper is all it is. Because I was in Zimbabwe when this collapsed, gentlemen. It was terrifying. It was terrifying.
Crazy stuff.
So anyway,
So Rick,
that's
you
why I'm
just
so
had your
adamant
big
about it.
annual
And
conference, and
this is proof I'm a gold guy. This is my gold mine I took public in Utah, on the ODV, one of the happiest days of my life to take a company public on the New York Stock Exchange. But
that
I'm
that
a
just
gold guy.
happened, right? A year and a half ago.
And they call me a stacker. I stack gold mines,
You stack gold mines instead of gold. Well, that's a great transition into one of the other ways to get leverage, and that is through the mining companies. And there's all kinds of, exploring companies and royalty companies and so forth. Rick, this is your area of expertise. You just got done with your awesome conference. Share with us the idea of investing before the gold becomes a coin.
Well, let's start with this. There's probably 3,000 uh, companies that purport to be in the mining or the oil and gas business worldwide. And I would suggest to you that probably 2,500 of them are worthless. So, although you have an idea that by participating in a company that purports to mine for gold or purports to want to mine for gold, not all are created equally. The New Orleans conference, since its inception, even before I went, has specialized in helping people separate the wheat from the chaff. We often joke in New Orleans and at my conference, as Robert just has, about the lack of utility of government currency. We talk about the fact that the clowns in Washington print vast amounts of worthless paper. The truth is that the private sector does anything more efficiently than the public sector, including counterfeit. And so if you're not careful which mining company you choose, what you'll find is really profligate people who are better at printing phony share certificates than the government is at printing money.
Wow.
The truth is that historically, the mining shares in a bull market have outperformed the metal about 2-1. The bad news is, well, bad depending on who you are, that the performance has been very selective. 10 to 15% of the issuers probably generate 80% of the positive utility. 85% of the issuers issue no utility at all. They just provide aggravation. And I would say that the beauty of New Orleans is, first of all, this is a conference that's gone on for a very long time. It stood the test of time. And they talk about gold in the entirety of the subject, remembering that the original moniker for the conference was the National Committee for Monetary Reform, to actually legalize gold. That'll tell you something about the history of the conference. But it's morphed as the gold industry has. When they made gold legal, Jim and Brien lost a reason to have a conference, so they had to update it a little bit so that they could continue to host everybody. But I think the real utility of the conference is that you're around people who've been in the gold business for 40 or 50 years and can help you separate the wheat from the chaff. Now, Robert, if you ask my wife, she would say the other reason that you come to the conference is it's possible to have a pretty good time in New Orleans, if you put your mind to it. You got to work hard at that, like she does. But it's a conference that has a wonderful tradition of working you hard all day and then allowing you to play hard in some people's cases most of the night. And I would encourage people to enjoy the entirety of the conference, learning how to make money during the day and then enjoying whatever else the conference in New Orleans has to offer in the evening.
I
Absolutely.
so one more thing is the VRIC, the Vancouver Real Estate Investing VRIC anyway. I go to speak at that one too. I go to learn because if you gentlemen know what the Vancouver Stock Exchange was known for, because that's where I cut my teeth going public, was in the Vancouver Stock Exchange. And the definition of a gold miner was a liar standing next to a hole in the ground. I think Mr. Rule and Mr. Lundin will agree with that. There were so many liars up there, and you had to know which was real, which was fake. And that's the reason what Rick Rule does. He evaluates these mining companies. And I don't publish the reason New York Stock Exchange listing was important to me was a little bit more credible than my last listing on Vancouver. Do you understand, Rick? I had a little bit more credibility for a change.
Nice. Well, hey, I think one of the things that, first of all, the four of us will all be at the New Orleans Investment Conference. If you're not planning to go, we'll convince you of that before we're done. It's an awesome time and great stuff. And Brien brings so many incredible speakers. But it is about continuing to get education because the world changes. There were a few years where from one conference to the next, the price of gold in dollars, not the value of gold, but the price really didn't change much. But a year ago, gold was worth $1,000 an ounce less than it is right now. So all of a sudden, I think we have people's attention. Brien, what's behind that big increase in price?
I'm sorry, I was muted, but a rookie mistake. But I tell people that this bull market in gold is unique. Now, as Rick alluded to, gold was illegal to own until the last day of 1974. So really, it's only had, say, 3 or 4 bull markets, including this one. But yet, in that history, we've seen nothing like this before, because this bull market has been driven not by investors investing in gold, not by Western investors specifically investing in gold, but by central banks buying gold. The actual people that have created the problem are now trying to desperately find a solution for it. But they've driven the price upward, that $1,000, even $1,500 since this bull market's begun. And we've never seen that again. And yet, the typical sectors, the investments I mentioned earlier, mining stocks and silver, that usually by this point have outperformed gold considerably, have lagged behind because central banks don't buy mining stocks and they don't buy silver. So that provides an opportunity right now like nothing we've ever seen before, where the gold price has not only gone to record heights, but has kept going and seems likely to go much, much further. But we still have an entree into the sector that's extremely affordable and offers all of the potential that it would have had in a typical bull market right at its beginnings. So mining stocks and silver right now provide a way for people to get into the sector and as an investment and realize all of that potential after the hard part, actually getting a bull market started and advancing it. That part's already been done.
Now, Rick, you were on Robert's Rich Dad radio show just a little while ago, and one of the great things that you shared, Rick, was the percentage of people's portfolio in the metals and how that has changed, which might give us a clue into the direction of the valuation. Can you share that with us?
If I can remember it. Both Robert and I are age challenged, of course. I think that the quote was one I stole from J.P. Morgan Chase, which suggests that the market share of precious metals and precious metals related securities relative to all other savings and investment asset classes in the country is only 0.5%.
Right.
It's also worthy to note that in the last 40 years, the median market share of precious metals has been 2%. So if precious metals merely returned to mean, I actually think it will overshoot mean, but I don't need to make that case. If precious metals merely reverts to mean, demand for the stuff grows fourfold, pardon me. And I think that's precisely what happens. Remember that demand growing fourfold is likely to have an outsize impact on price because prices are set at the margin between supply and demand. Prices are set at the 5 or 10% of the market where supply and demand touch each other, not through the whole value chain. My gold, and likely Robert's gold as an example, isn't for sale at any price like the current price. So I think that's important. I also think it's important, and Robert likely disagrees with me on this. I think it's important if you buy the gold thesis, not to buy it hook, line, and sinker. I've met people at my conference and the New Orleans conference who are 100% in gold. And I think that's difficult too. If you are overcommitted to the trade, if something goes wrong in your personal life, you can't stay the trade.
Yeah.
So you need a judicious mix of various asset classes. I save in gold. I invest in gold stocks. I speculate in the more speculative gold stocks. But I keep gold, admittedly, as a much greater percentage of my portfolio than most people do. But I mean, for most people, even today, after the price run in gold, most folks, even on Wall Street, can't spell gold. And there's only 4 letters in it,
Right.
Most people, as the statistics would suggest, are grievously underinvested in gold.
Now, Robert, this is a point. First of all, we'll allow you a counterpoint if you want to disagree with Rick on this, but maybe where does gold fit into your portfolio and when? Because I know you say cash is trash. We don't want to hang on to currency. So when does it make sense to get into gold? And what do you think about the fact that the price might go up 4 times or more?
Well, I became a silver nut in 1965. So this is a Kennedy $50. And I was a kid, 65, I was 18 years old, and I held this thing up and it was copper. And this is called Gresham's Law, if you guys are in this thing. And that's when I became a gold and silver bug.
Yeah.
So today I own a lot of silver, a lot of gold, a lot of Bitcoin, and a lot of real estate. So basically, and oil. So if you look at my investment portfolio, it's hard assets. I have stocks, but they're my stocks. I don't recommend my stocks because Rick will jump all over me. He says, that thing's a phony piece of crap right now. I said, it could be. I don't know. But as I said, gold mining, Rick, is one of the most speculative, high risk investments you can do. I mean, as I learned in Vancouver as a kid, a gold miner is a liar standing next to a hole in the ground. And I had to do a lot of lying. I say, yeah, because we got this proof, we got this here and all this, just to get the Toronto. I took my first listing on Toronto, and I did a Toronto Stock Exchange listing. It was in a place, that communist republic called China. We struck gold, and we did as we said. And guess what? China confiscated it. So I learned another law in gold mine investing. It's called country risk. Don't invest in countries that don't respect the Rick rule of law. And China does not respect it. So they took my effing gold mine, and I was a billionaire for about a year. And today China claims to be this big exporter of gold. I go, yeah, why don't you say thank you, you assholes? You sons of bitches. But Rick, I found out the hard way that you could be a successful gold miner in the wrong country. It's such a speculative industry. So I'll say it again. It's really simple. You go to New Orleans, Brian's event or Rick's event, because you can see the future. The people that understand gold and silver could get extremely rich. And people who are holding this garbage will probably be wiped out. That's how simple it is. And those financial planners are always telling me about the S&P 500. I said, God, why don't you tell me to go to Las Vegas? Which is going up and down? I have no idea. But if I'm holding tangible gold and silver, I have a chance.
Well, that's such a good point, right? If it's in your possession, that's kind of the first level. Brien, you talk about that. You ought to have some that you can hold in your hand and it's got no counterparty risk. It's not somebody else's offsetting liability, which is a great way to start. But also, it seems as though, and I'd love to hear both Rick and Brien chime in on this, gold is continuing to peak near its top. Silver isn't. Silver still has a way to go before it's at its previous high. And then the mining shares often lag behind that. Does that create an opportunity in those areas?
Yeah, I'll start off. I think it creates a huge opportunity. I think this is, and we named the webinar generational opportunity because we haven't seen anything like this since the early 2000s, in my opinion. And if you're at this early stage, I mean, in 2000, the mining stocks were bombed out, the metals were bombed out, gold and silver were bombed out. So it took cash and a hefty dose of courage to go all in or to invest in the sector at that point in time. Right now, it's fairly obvious what the opportunity is. Gold's at record heights again. Silver and mining stocks are lagging, haven't really moved in a commensurate fashion. Now, silver offers natural leverage to gold. It has always outperformed gold in this kind of a bull market, and it's just starting to do that now. Silver stocks leverage silver itself, so you can stack leverage on top of leverage through the silver stocks. Now, the universe of silver stocks is much smaller than gold. That's where part of the leverage comes from, because whatever money is going into the sector and trying to find that leverage has fewer opportunities to attract that money, so they rise accordingly. So yeah, I think that's a tremendous opportunity right now, silver and silver stocks.
Now, Rick, you study mining even beyond that. Obviously, copper, some of the other metals. We haven't talked about platinum or palladium, and then even oil and gas. What else would you say about mining opportunities right now?
Well, you make a very good point. You don't need to be commodity centric to make money as a speculator. Historically, in commodities, you look for a commodity outside of precious metals, if you want to be outside of precious metals, that is a true contrarian opportunity. Specifically, you look for a commodity where society needs that commodity to function materially as it does today, but the commodity is priced at a discount to the cost of production. You actually perversely look for an industry in liquidation. You do that because if the price doesn't go up, the commodity becomes unavailable. You'll
Right.
remember earlier during the COVID days when oil was selling briefly at $1 a barrel, then at $20 a barrel. It was taking the industry fully loaded, $60 a barrel to make the stuff. They were selling it for 20. Now, there was only two things that could happen in that circumstance. The price of oil would go up or your car wouldn't start.
Right.
So the nature of most natural resource investments is contrarian. The nature of gold and silver is different. People need to understand that. Historically, gold has done well. When people become concerned about the maintenance of their purchasing power in fiat denominated instruments, and this will be a wonderful year to talk about the sort of leverage in precious metals. People would ask at a New Orleans conference in 2022, when is the gold price going to go up? And I'd scratch my chin sagely, and I'd say, well, I think it's going to go up in the year 2000. It's increased at 8% compounded for 23 years. What do you want? So anyway, we're sort of past that. The price has begun to justify the narrative. But when people say gold is at an all-time high, what they mean is that gold is at a nominal high.
Right.
If you adjust for the purchasing power of the dollar against an intelligently constructed basket of goods and services, gold isn't at its all-time high, and silver isn't close to its all-time high. And then you take the leverage that Brien talked about, And we do this at New Orleans. We'll put it in context for you. Here's an example. Last year, Agnico Eagle, a major mining company, was selling for half the price it is now. But statistically, rationally, it's cheaper today, having doubled, than it was before it's doubled. Here's why. If you take the net present value of Agnico Eagle's mining operations at today's gold price relative to the gold price that existed a year ago, despite doubling, the free cash flow sells at a lower multiple today than it did then. So when Brien talks about the leverage, that's the leverage. A stock that doubles in 12 months, that's cheaper on a valuation basis than it was 12 months ago. Brien said another important thing. The progression through gold bull markets has always been led by the metal. It always goes to the best of the best producers, and is always led by gold. But in my experience, this is my fourth precious metals bull market. In my experience, at some point in time, the momentum in gold and then the gold stocks attracts the generalist investors into the space. And my observation is that when the generalist investors come into the space, silver, perhaps because of its lower unit cost, but I don't know why, but silver begins to outpace and then dramatically outpace gold. And then there's one final component, which is the higher quality silver stocks. Our mutual friend Doug Casey says that when the generalist investor comes into the silver stock market, that the market capitalization is so small that the result is, quote, like trying to siphon Hoover Dam through a garden hose. I remember, Brien, correct me if the year's wrong, but I think in 1990, at the beginning of that epic silver bull market, we introduced two little silver speculations at the New Orleans conference. One, Jim was the co-author of, called Silver Standard. The other was Pan American Silver. If my memory is correct, we underwrote Pan American at 50 cents and Silver Standard at 72. 6 years later, they were both trading north of $40 a share.
Wow.
That's the leverage inherent in those very, very, very few silver stocks that are led by high quality people with high quality projects. And hopefully, wandering around the floor at the New Orleans conference, I mean, maybe we won't deliver you a 40 bagger. Maybe we'll only get you a 10 bagger. But if you combine the possibility of a 10 bagger with the fun that you can have in New Orleans, probably ought to come to the conference.
Yeah, and let me just add on to that, Rick. It was 1993, actually. I remember it well. And it was a remarkable thing because they just doubled, and then they doubled again, and then doubled again. And it harkens back to that wealth creation. Now, they were a bit before the early 2000s bull market, but they really moved in that early 2000s bull market. And that's the kind of opportunity I see again. And getting back to what Robert said and what you said, is going to these conferences, you're not just, I don't want to say just, but you are mingling with a lot of other smart investors in the crowd who really see and understand the role of gold and where we're going. That's priceless. You get great people speaking from the podium that give you great strategies and occasionally top picks. But one aspect that's often overlooked is the ability to go to the booths, go into the exhibit hall, go to find the exhibiting companies where you can talk to the CEOs and you can get insights. You're not going to get non-public information. You're not going to get information you shouldn't get. And if you do, then I would avoid those kinds of companies. But what you will get is to look those people in the eye, get a more fulsome explanation of the story, get color of what they're looking for and why. And that's where you can separate the wheat from the chaff. That's where you can find in this innately inefficient marketplace, you can find the values, the gems that the market temporarily overlooks. That's where you find the silver standards. That's where you find the Great Bear Resources, one of our biggest winners in Gold Newsletter, went up 85 times in value from when we recommended it. And I can tell you that there were people, smart people, geologists, who told me to sell that all along the way. And when I would ask them, well, have you talked to management? They would say, no, we haven't. And I'm like, well, I've talked to management a dozen times. My conference attendees have talked to management over and over again, and they see the true story. That's the big advantage that this provides you in this kind of a market. You can find tomorrow's winners today.
Now, one of the things we promised the folks watching is we would name some names. So in a minute, we'll ask Rick and Brien to give us a couple, but you don't want to just write them down and go buy them. I think the lesson is you learn so much when you come. This is how I learned about it. I went to New Orleans as a journalist to cover the event and was blown away that I could walk from booth to booth and look at these core samples and these maps and meet geologists. I was in over my head, but it's been such a beneficial thing. And I wouldn't probably have bought an ounce of gold without counsel from my friend Robert Kiyosaki. I wouldn't learned about these types of companies without coming to your event, Brien. And then every time that Rick either moderates a panel or gives a talk, I learn something. Robert, before we ask the gentleman for some picks, I know you have a time constraint today. So can you just kind of sum it up for us, for folks that are thinking, well, maybe I missed it, maybe gold and silver are too high. Is there still opportunity?
Oh, of course there is. I mean, but you gotta get smarter. I think, I have an altar built to the Hunt brothers, and you guys will laugh at that because they educated the world on greed, if anybody did. And they got, the FOMO was so intense on silver, but they educated me. I learned more about silver from those guys because they were greedy liars. And the best thing about going to the conferences, if you're a liar, you go to New Orleans or VRI Vancouver or Rick Rule's conference, if you're a liar, they'll call you out. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to be a liar amongst professionals.
Right.
And that's, I think, I find refreshing in today because Robert, Mr. Helms, you remember a thing called what he called the real estate crash of 2008.
Oh, sure.
That's because derivatives fired off.
Yeah.
And the average guy has no idea what the word derivative meant. Had nothing to do with real estate. It did, but it wasn't real estate. It was these fake investment things called derivatives.
Yeah.
And today, the stock market is $1 trillion. Derivatives are quadrillion. So the time bomb is still set to go. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball. But at this time of my life, an old guy, I'd rather have hard gold and hard silver than fake stuff. That's as simple as I can say it.
Love that. Well, thank you for your contribution today. We'll look forward to seeing you at the New Orleans Investment Conference, and you can check out what Robert does on the Rich Dad radio show. Brien, let's come back to maybe some of the picks, and not just, a company they should consider, but maybe the why behind that.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in this market, as I alluded to. There is one particular area thematically that I think offers a lot of opportunity, and that's what's historically been called the optionality plays, the companies that accumulated very large gold and or silver plays. Silver Standard started off like that. Pan American Silver started off like that. What they did was accumulate very large resources that were out of the money, weren't economic at current metals prices. The idea being that as metals prices rose, that those resources in the ground would become economic and instantly create real value on the balance sheet. We've been following those, literally created those with Rick in the early 1990s and have been following them ever since. Well, right now, every one of those gold optionality plays is not only economic at current metals prices, but robustly economic. And the market has not adjusted to reflect that fact. There are some companies I like Banyan Gold. you should assume that I own these, but I will say it. I do own Banyan Gold. It has a very large resource that is selling for somewhere around $10 an ounce in the ground. I really like that as an optionality play. Seabridge Gold is another one that is the ultimate optionality play and has been forever. There are silver plays I like. One I like right now is Prince Silver. It has a resource, or not a resource yet, but it has a project in Nevada that it can, I believe, easily drill off to a very impressive resource worth much more than its current market cap. Another aspect of the market that I can't avoid are the exploration plays. These are the higher risk, higher return, higher potential plays, the hair on fire speculations, as it were, in an area that's already somewhat risky. One of my favorite, probably my favorite play right there, is Prospector Metals. The great management team drilling a target that has been misunderstood in the Yukon and should have results out within the next month. The first results from its exploration, taking another look at the story. I really like that one. So those are just a few that I really like right now.
Thanks for that. Rick, what would you add to that conversation?
I usually like to confine my conference-related picks to exhibitors at the conference. I know Brien likes me to do that, but I don't know the exhibitors at his conference, so I can't do that. I can say for most of the people listening to this call that most of them are grievously underinvested in the gold miners as a class. And for most people, just being involved in the game is where they need to start. So I always suggest building a gold portfolio of what I call the golden triumvirate, the best of the best. That's Franco-Nevada, Wheaton Precious, and Agnico Eagle. You start with the best of the best before you go down market. It's more fun to go down market, and going down market is why you come to my conference or why you come to the New Orleans conference. But I don't want somebody to buy a share because Rick Rule says to buy it. I want somebody to use the name I gave them and study and make their own conclusions. Brien, is EMX exhibiting this year? Will they be down?
I don't know yet, but there's still time for them to sign up if they
Well,
so
we'll visit
don't
with
let
them.
that constrain you whatsoever. EMX is a wonderful company.
One of the things I like to see are companies, there's Doug Casey says there's two kind of companies. There's companies that believe your money is more valuable than their shares. So they do financings where they sell their shares for your money. There's other companies that believe that their shares are more valuable than the money. They're ones that are using money to buy back the shares. EMX is a small company. It's going to generate about $35 million in royalty revenue this year, that believes that their shares are undervalued enough that they're trading their money for your shares. You can imagine the best arbiter of a company's value is the company itself. And if they're issuing shares, they're telling you what they think the share might be worth relative to the money. And if they're buying back shares, they're telling you the same kind of lesson. So I think what I'm going to do is hold off talking about the smaller companies. I'm going to tell people listening to this conference that you start at the top. You buy the best of the best. You buy the Franco, you buy the Wheaton, you buy the Agnico, and then you fill in your portfolio before that. You go up the risk curve to the extent that you're willing to do the work to study the companies. And that's why you go to New Orleans. You go to New Orleans to get the educational stuff from the podium and then use the education that you receive from the podium and frankly, from your fellow attendees to wander around on the exhibit floor and separate, in move parlance, the good from the bad from the ugly.
So I've got to go, gentlemen. The tooth fairy is calling. And,
Thank you,
Robert,
Robert.
go get your tooth put back in.
yeah, you go to New Orleans or you go to Rick's conference or you go to Robert Helms's conference with the real estate investors because you want your education. Because if you don't get your educated from these guys, then you're getting, to me, financial planners are the Jeffrey Epstein of financial education. They prey on the young.
Nice.
You don't want any perverts giving you education on money. So anyway, thank you, gentlemen. I'm honored. I
Thank you,
see
Robert.
you both in New Orleans, all three of you
Thank-
in New Orleans. So thank you.
Thanks, Robert. See you there. And thanks, Rick. I know you got to run as
Yep,
well.
I've got to jump off too. Thank you, gentlemen. I'll see you all in New Orleans.
Thank
We'll
you,
see you
Rick.
in New Orleans. You can learn more about what Rick teaches at Rule Classroom. They've got wonderful education there. He is a consummate educator, not only at his conference, but at conferences like New Orleans. And anytime you want to go to Rule Classroom, you can do that. Brien, the conference is coming up November 2nd through the 5th.
Yep.
I have not missed it since I went the first time 15 years ago. What can we expect this year at the 51st annual New Orleans Investment Conference?
Well, you can expect the typically great lineup of speakers that we get. And I think they're great because I pick them. I'm a fan of every one of these speakers. You know, we're getting Brent Johnson this year, Danielle DiMartino Booth, Dave Collum, George Gammon, Jim Urio, Jim Bianco, Lawrence Lepard, Jordan Roy Byrne, Matt Taibbi. I'm just reading off a list here. Peter Bookvar, Peter Schiff, Rick Rule, Robert Helms of all people, Peter St. Ange, Bob Prechter, Tavi Costa. So it goes on and on and on. That's just a partial listing, and we have more coming. But it is a who's who of what I believe to be the best thought leaders and minds out there today. And if you want to see the full list, learn more, just go to neworleansconference.com and get a taste of the speakers that we're going to be presenting, but also the kind of experience and kind of information you're going to get in New Orleans.
I will say you are a wonderful host at this event. It's a ton of fun, but a ton of work. So in the main hall, you've got incredible macroeconomic speakers. You'll see more charts and graphs and be convinced of the direction of the markets by some of the smartest people you ever meet. And then we wander over across the hallway to the exhibit area where you get to meet these companies and their management and sometimes their geologists. And it's just an amazing way to learn hands-on. You're not just reading a book or listening to a podcast. All that's good stuff. But here's where you can ask questions. And as you point out, Brien, ask questions of the other attendees. It's almost all accredited investors, a lot of seasoned folks. I go to it because I feel young there, because there's so much wisdom in the room, and yet we're continuing to bring folks who are new into the space. Don't be intimidated. If you've never invested in gold and silver, like I really hadn't, then come to the New Orleans Investment Conference. You'll get a wonderful primer on how to invest. You got some great nuggets today. I loved Rick saying start with the solid companies that have been around a long time, not fancy. You're not going to 10 bag those, but get your foot in the door. Own some actual metal. You have several gold and silver dealers on the floor, so you can leave with some metal. Now, you don't have to do that, but there is opportunity to talk to these dealers, meet them, understand the differences and so forth. And then if you want to get into the more speculative stuff, well, there's not a better place to learn about it and ask questions. So I can't recommend it strongly enough. It is November 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th in beautiful New Orleans, Louisiana. It's the New Orleans Investment Conference, and this will be the 51st year. So big thanks to our attendees today, all of you for showing up. And if you're watching the replay, well, thanks for watching. And of course, huge thanks to Brien for hosting us today and the conference, to Rick Rule, who always has something awesome to say, and to my lifelong friend, Mr. Robert Kiyosaki. All four of us will be at the New Orleans Investment Conference, and you should too. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Robert.